Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. I'm gonna set the scene today for and talk a bit about the state of the European tech ecosystem. I'm gonna go through a lot of data, so I'll get right into it. So I'm gonna talk about three things. I always like to start about why do startups matter. I'm going to talk a bit about the current market sentiment, because we're in a kind of strange time, of course. And I'll finish off talking specifically about the Baltic tech ecosystem. So why do startups matter? Well, first of all, the tech sector is eclipsing all other sectors. And you can see that, for example, here, if you look at the five biggest tech companies, the five biggest companies in the world are all tech companies. And just 10 years ago, that was completely different. And here on the left-hand side, you can see all the biggest tech companies with little American flags next to it, some Chinese flags. There's one Saudi oil company in there, but there's almost no European companies. All the way at the bottom, we have a French company that makes handbags and sells champagne. So Europe basically missed the boat in a large extent in the 90s and early 2000s. And on the right-hand side, you can see Europe's share of global equity, which has shrunk considerably. So yeah, this is the first answer to the question, why do startups matter? But the good news is that Europe gets a second chance, because entrepreneurial value creation is at an all-time high. And here, these lines represent different cohorts of startups. And so the longest line is a cohort of startups that's been created in 1990 to 1994. So that includes Amazon, that includes NVIDIA, mostly American companies. Then the second line, let me look over here, is cohort of companies including eBay. But you can see every new cohort ramps up faster than the previous one. So this is like the effect that you see in the tech sector. So people think that big tech is very dominant and powerful and monopolistic. And yeah, there is a high concentration, but economic dynamism is also very high. And so that gives So there's a regeneration of startups happening all the time. And so in the older cohorts, Europe was basically not really playing a role, and the US companies were unchallenged. Then some challenge came from Asia, but in the latest cohorts, you see that European startups are really doing quite well. But there's another reason that startups matter. So what are startups? I really like this definition by Paul Graham. Startups are companies designed to grow fast. And they are the perfect vehicle to drive innovation, because you have skin in the game, you have this rapid iteration, and startups are very clever in exploiting technology that already exists to create a new user experience. And so some startups fail, most fail. But in aggregate, the ones that succeed, they tend to grow really fast, and that's good for the economy. So at Dealroom, we've done a lot of work on this. We work together with cities all over the world, over 50 cities in Europe alone. And we looked in depth at what are startups doing for their economy. And we found out that startups grow jobs in aggregate 3 times faster than the traditional economy. So there's a massive opportunity for job creation. And here you can see, so what this data here shows is the percentage of jobs that are actually coming from VC-backed tech companies. So on the left, you see the Bay Area, and 68% of all jobs there at public companies come from VC-backed tech companies. In the US, so including the Bay Area, but also the rest of the US, it's 24%. In the UK and the EU, it's about 1 to 2%. So a lot of upside. And then the third and last reason for today why startups really, really matter has to do with innovation and R&D spending. So back in the day, R&D was dominated by industrial companies, but not anymore. So big tech is now dominating R&D. Innovation is coming from tech companies in general. And yeah, these are usually VC-backed companies. So this is why startups matter. But now I'm going to shift to a different topic, which is the current market sentiment. So what's actually going on now in the market? So yeah, this is the NASDAQ. And I'm showing it here since 1992, so I think it gives an interesting perspective. So NASDAQ at the moment is down 20%, which seems, yeah, on this chart, maybe not that bad. But if you would look at high growth tech stocks, many of them are down like 80%. And I'm sure you've all seen the news. There is actually a lot of tech companies that went public recently and that have almost no value at the moment. Like their value is sometimes just equal to the amount of cash they have on their balance sheet, which means that the underlying business is not being valued at all. So yeah, I mean, what is going on? There is this kind of flight to safety attitude going on where people still want to invest in tech, but only in the big names. And they stay away from kind of risky assets. So that's a complete turnaround from, let's say, where we were end of last year. And I think what you'll see is that companies that have a high burn, that they will have a really tough time. And if they're in a competitive market and a high burn and they're maybe not the leader in the space, they're going to have a tough time and they might get acquired or not be able to fundraise their plan. But there was the public market, so that's in real time. What's actually happening in the private market in startup investing? So this chart, Dealroom data, shows global venture capital investment in Q1. So the last bar shows Q1 activity of this year. So actually, again, you see investment kind of continued. It's not a big dip. It's still historically at record levels. But if you talk with people in the tech community, they're saying, yeah, just wait until Q2 because it's going to look different. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see if that's true. In Europe, VC activity was even stronger. So here you can see this was Q1 was like the second highest quarter ever. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the next quarter is going to look like. So the numbers show a very active ecosystem, but when you talk to people, they're saying it's gonna change. But we have to see if it's true. Because what's also happening is that European VCs have been raising record amount of money in Q1. So that means there's more dry powder than ever. And yeah, the fundamentals of investing in European startups haven't really changed that much. Because what you see is, and you can see that at this event as well, entrepreneurs are becoming more ambitious. They're going after bigger markets. These bigger markets are also more accessible because there's a much higher generation of people now, of a bigger generation of people that are, adopting new technologies, and they're more digitally native than ever. So the fundamentals are good. What you also see is this kind of exponential progress being made, which is leading to like very futuristic technologies, including rockets, not only SpaceX, which you see here, but also in Europe, quantum computing, many startups directly addressing big challenges. We have also seen some of those in this event. Things like synthetic biology, so like processing power of computers is going like through the roof, and this results in AI being more powerful than ever. So we're now exactly at this moment where we're going to see a lot of these breakthrough technologies. And so at a fundamental level, this is like the most exciting period ever. And these kind of macro factors about inflation and like the tail risk of kind of geopolitical issues, that's kind of on the background, but the fundamentals are better than ever. So that's kind of the state of the European tech ecosystem and the sentiment. So I wanted to finish off talking a bit about the Baltic tech ecosystem specifically. So what this chart here shows is the total combined value of startups created since 2000 in Central and Eastern Europe. And each color represents a region. So Poland is at the bottom, then you have Romania. Romania is quite big thanks to UiPath. Poland also has a couple of big startups, but the Baltics are basically the second largest after Poland. And yeah, that's quite exceptional. If you consider there's only about 6 million people, so it's one of the smallest regions in terms of people, but it's basically one of the biggest in terms of actual value created by startups. So that's, there's no other region in Europe really that has this density in terms of value being created by startups. So Baltics are like a truly exceptional region in that sense. Here we kind of zoom into the Baltic region. So again, this chart shows the kind of enterprise value of all startups created and currently headquartered in the Baltics. And their combined value is about 22 billion. If I include startups that have moved out of the Baltics region, so like Wise, for example, the total value is 44 billion. So it's already a very significant ecosystem. And the different stacks, they represent like the time that they were created. So these are different cohorts of startups. And you can see that the red are cohorts since 2010, and they actually represent the biggest value. So the effect that I showed you earlier globally, that this regeneration of startups in each new generation creates a bigger value, you see that also here in the Baltic region very strongly. But as I mentioned earlier, some startups have moved out, and I think that's maybe the elephant in the room for the region. So yeah, Skype is a long time ago, but companies like Wise, Pipedrive, and others have moved out. And there are also more recent startups that have moved out of the region. They're moving to San Francisco, London, New York. And yeah, it's a complicated and kind of subtle topic, I think, because it's a double-edged sword. If startups are successful and you want them to go wherever they feel they can build their business, so that's a good thing. But at the same time, you do want to, you do want to avoid kind of a drain of the best startups going to the US or to the UK. So I think it's something to consider. And of course, the US and the UK are the most popular destinations for these startups. So 60% of those that emigrate go to the US, 25% of those that emigrate go to the UK. But on the positive side, there are also startups that are actually locating into the Baltic, so including Revolut, Unity, Twilio. I'm from Amsterdam, and I heard on the way here that Amsterdam also wanted Revolut to come to Amsterdam, but there was just too much bureaucracy going on. And basically, like, if I understood correctly, the attitude of the central bank was not really that of an innovator. And I think that really speaks to the Baltic region because, when people speak about the region, they feel like, in general, like politicians are very forward thinking. And that's attracts companies like Revolut. And that's just really good for the ecosystem because it, kind of absorbs more people from the economy into tech who can learn from these companies and later create their own companies. There are also startups that have been founded elsewhere, and they actually relocated into the Baltics because they just felt here is a better environment to create a startup. So that's also really interesting to see. And lastly, like VC investment in the Baltics. So here you can see really like by half year how much venture capital basically is invested in Baltic startups. And in the first half of this year, it was already at 1.1 billion, and we're only in April. So really by far the most active period in venture capital investment is right now. And if you consider like kind of market environment more generally, that's I think yeah, quite a remarkable development. So in summary, what you see happening in the Baltics is that this flywheel is starting to spin and has been doing that for quite a while. So there have been a couple of high-profile exits, high-profile companies, and yeah, that has kind of two effects. So on the right, you see like, yeah, the region is getting on the global radar, and that has been happening already for quite a while, which attracts more capital and yeah, more ambitious companies. And then because the ambitions are higher, you get bigger outcomes and bigger exits. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, more on the talent side, you see that these exits, they create a generation, these mafias of skilled talent and also angel investors that attracts more quality startups that have a proper cap table. They don't, you know, I think in the past you get these startups that actually had potential, but the cap table is not properly set up because they get an angel on board who is not used to the startup way of thinking, so claims too high a stake. And then, yeah, the startup is already kind of, yeah, almost, it doesn't have a chance anymore to become really, really successful. But once you have these exits, you have the right kind of people investing in startups, then that completely changes and opens up possibilities. And that attracts also early VCs with global quality standards. And I think, so Change VC is one example of that, but there are also many others. So in conclusion, finishing my talk there, so entrepreneurship and innovation are key to Europe's future. I showed the 3 reasons for that. You know, it has to do with kind of staying relevant as a continent. It has to do with jobs. It has to do with innovation. If you look at the current environment, so there's uncertainty and inflation, and this leads to kind of a flight to quality, flight to safety. And so, yeah, high cash burn companies that are reliant, that have been reliant on this kind of sea of capital, they will face a bumpy road. So there's maybe some shakeout going to happen, consolidation in some sectors, in these kind of high burn kind of consumer sectors, for example, where there's a lot of competition. But the underlying megatrends, they remain in place. And you can summarize it in kind of 2 things. There's this kind of global entrepreneurial movement, so this entrepreneurial age, where entrepreneurs know that if they build a good product, they can almost instantly scale it globally and compete with the biggest companies in the world. And then you have at the same time this exponential pace of innovation, which will lead to more and more breakthrough technologies. There will, in the coming years, more and more headlines with new innovations that will kind of blow people's minds. And that's gonna continue happening and accelerating. And then lastly, the Baltic region specifically, is a really an exceptional region in terms of kind of the density of entrepreneurial value creation, which is great to see. And it's also one of the fastest growing regions in Europe right now. So That's a good job. So thank you.